Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our Ask the Expert series. If you're new to our webinar series, welcome and thanks for being here. Criterion Edge runs multiple informative webinars throughout the year. Today's live Q&A topic is 2023 MDR IVDR submission readiness, getting your ducks in a row from the writer's perspective. We're proud to announce that Criterion Edge has been awarded Company of the Year among top regulatory services companies. So how can we help you? As we near the end of this year, if you have urgent project needs or are looking to learn more about our services, we would be happy to book an appointment with you. You can email us for a free 30-minute consultation at consult@criterionedge.com. You can also book a meeting time directly with the link that we will send in the chat. Our first presenter today is Lori Mitchell, founder and president of Criterion Edge, a global medical and regulatory writing firm serving the medical device, pharmaceutical, and biotech industries. Lori has over 20 years of experience in medical writing, safety and pharmacovigilance management, and regulatory reporting. Having provided regulatory medical writing solutions to many pharma and medical device companies, both large and small, she is a proven leader in designing practical strategies to meet current global regulatory challenges. Lori is a published author and holds a Master of Nursing from UCLA. Also joining us today is Cheryl Van Allen, Senior Account Manager with Criterion Edge. Cheryl leads the client relations team at Criterion Edge with expertise gained from 3 decades of experience within the medical device, in vitro device, pharmaceutical, and healthcare industries. Cheryl strategizes with both new and existing clients to design optimal regulatory, medical, and scientific writing services and systematic literature review solutions to support critical regulatory and clinical objectives. Welcome, Cheryl. And now I will turn it over to Lori to give an overview of our session today. And Lori, you might have to unmute yourself.
Yep, I unmuted myself. Hi, everyone. This is Lori Mitchell, and welcome, and thank you for coming to this webinar today. And I'd like to also welcome my co-presenter, Cheryl Van Allen, to provide her perspectives from account management and client relations and management as well. She's got some insights that she can add to this. So welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you, Lori.
Today, you're welcome. So today we're going to be talking about your MDR or IVDR. We may have members from both industries here on the call today, getting ready for submissions under those regulations in 2023. And we field a lot of questions both from our current clients or in our calls with potential new clients about how they can get ready and what do they need to do and what are we missing, what aren't we thinking about, what do we have right, what might we have wrong, where are our gaps. So these are all great questions to ask yourselves in your clinical and regulatory teams in-house. And we might be able to lend we at Criterion Edge might be able to lend some colored commentary to that and additional insights. So from our point of view, this is our point of view. We are regulatory, medical, scientific writers. We are not regulatory affairs professionals, but we certainly, as I always say, we certainly have opinions gained from years of experience writing MDD and MDR documents. We have plenty of opinions about what works in those documents and reports and what doesn't work from the notified body perspective and just also from a writing perspective. Another thing I want to mention is that for most of our medical device clients who have already had the benefit of notified body feedback on their submitted reports, and we began writing MDD-related reports in 2017, and then by 2018, late 2018, some of our clients were already having us pivot to MDR. So we've seen many notified body responses come back, because we've helped many of our clients prepare the answers to those questions. And so we see a lot of themes across multiple companies and across multiple therapeutic areas. The same themes tend to show up, and we'll talk more. We'll take your questions today and talk more about that. We've already had many questions provided during registration, so we thank you for that. And if you have additional questions live during the webinar, then please submit them, and we'll try to get to those as well, as Olivia said. So Olivia, without further ado, let's go to our first question.
Okay. Here's our first question today. Lori and Cheryl, can you please speak more about the value of performing a CER gap analysis prior to starting MDR activities?
We can, and I'm going to throw this one to Cheryl, because Cheryl and I talk to new clients frequently, and this question of where do we start, what are we missing, where do we go from here, these questions often come up in those calls. And Cheryl, if you can talk a little bit more about the value of doing a gap analysis early on, that would be great.
Oh, I'm happy to do that, Lori. In our experience over the years and working with hundreds at this stage of clients of various sizes and scales and levels of experience with MDD and MDR submissions, we found one thing to be true, and that is that a good holistic overview of the existing MDD, or perhaps draft of an initial MDR CER, a holistic overview of a draft will provide the very best launching point for creating a submission, a CER submission that is aligned and conforming to MDCG guidance as well as to MDR when it comes to review by the notified body. This can be a very relatively quick type of service that can be provided by a qualified regulatory writing provider such as Criterion Edge. And it can provide the necessary guidance from an MDR writing expert on where your current MDD gap, your current MDD CER or your draft MDR CER sits with respect to any gaps, any challenges that may need to be addressed, whether that is around data sufficiency, whether that is around safety and performance objectives or acceptance, the definition of acceptance criteria, among many other elements of the CER, and identify those areas that need to be solved in order for a successful MDR CER submission to the notified body. Lori, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. That's let's see. Oh, I'm not muted. Thank you, Cheryl. That's a great summary. And for those of you listening, when we're talking to new clients, especially new clients, we ask to see their previous CER as we're engaging with them to just get an idea of where the traps might land and what the client will need to do proactively to help us as the writing team even get ready to begin to write. The state of your risk benefit analysis, do you understand who your competitors are to provide to us? That's a very early activity. Do you understand what PICO terms and such we would need to put in our literature searches all kinds of, from small issues, the small questions, to major issues. So that gap analysis is a great place to start. And if you've got more questions, certainly reach out and we can talk to you more about that. But I think that's that question. And I think, Olivia, we can go to the next.
All right. Moving on to our next question. As the auditors work with the new reporting regulations, are there lessons learned from auditors that will prepare us?
Oh, that's actually something I think that we just mentioned. So when we're looking at the responses from the notified bodies on behalf of our clients, and when they're asking for our assistance to prepare the responses or some of the responses, there are some lessons learned. We've done that many times. So we begin to, as I alluded in my intro, we begin to see themes develop. And I think we'll probably be talking a lot about those themes. One lesson learned, and I bet we'll talk about this again before this webinar is over, is, and this sometimes is the hardest for inexperienced teams that are inexperienced in writing the CER to wrap their heads around, is that this is a complex story. The CER is a story. It's not a CSR. It's not like any other type of report. As I like to say about the CER, and this would be true if we have IVD folks on the call, it would be the same for the PER. These reports are the report on the clinical evaluation processes that your company is undergoing, throughout the life cycle of the device. These are ongoing activities. And so the CER is a report of the findings of your ongoing activities within your own company on that particular device. And as such, the CER has what I call a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it starts with the state-of-the-art section, and it moves all the way through to the risk-benefit analysis, which really is where the conclusion lands, and the story is tied up. And the throughput of those storylines is very, very critically important to maintain throughout the CER. And you ask, why are you talking about this? Lessons learned from auditors, which I take to mean notified body. That is probably number one that we see, is that the notified body has lost their way in reading the CER, and they don't know, the CER does not carry them through the story. It's piecemeal, it jumps around, it doesn't tell us a beginning to end story. So that would be one of the lessons learned. Get yourself a good template and a good writer, and give them plenty of time. That would be another lesson learned, I would say, to a good writer or writers, or a good vendor partner, whatever that is. And another lesson that I always say is time, the lesson of time. There's two kinds of time that you need to be thinking about. Calendar days, how many days do you have to write the CER and to get ready for this submission? And how many hours have you provided someone to do that? Hours are different than days. Calendar day, because sometimes there's delays, and then the writer's not writing anything because there's some sort of an internal delay. So be thinking about time. If you ask us, 3 months is barely comfortable to write a CER. We can do it in less, but we certainly don't like to. And 4 months is much, much better, from the beginning to the submission date, and because that would also include internal reviews. So be thinking about those kinds of lessons, the lessons of time, the lessons of experience and organization, and the lessons provided by a solid gap analysis that we just talked about, that you can finding your gaps and filling them before the need is upon you. Proactively finding and filling your gaps before the need is immediate. So that's my answer to that question.
All right, thanks, Lori. Moving on to our next question. This person is asking, how do you define clinical safety and performance objectives for devices with no direct clinical benefit?
Well, there's a bit of a difference there between S&P, safety and performance objectives, and the assessment of clinical benefits, whether of the device, whether they be direct or indirect. Clinical benefits often arise out of the state-of-the-art landscape analysis, but not always. And they are different than, the benefits are different than data, clinical data. And the clinical safety and performance objectives, those are teased away from clinical benefits in that you need to establish for your device under evaluation 2 or 3 each of, and sometimes just one, safety objective and performance objective or objectives. These safety and performance objectives arise from not only the key functionality of your device, its indications, intended purpose. It needs to, these S&P objectives is what I'll call them. They need to support the device's intended purpose, population, intended use. Where do they come from? They should come from something like your internal analysis of what is it that your device does and what is it intended to do. As I said, its intended purpose and use. Have you done clinical trials on your device? If you have, it comes from these safety and performance objectives commonly echo your clinical trial endpoints. Thirdly, you can look in your analysis of the state-of-the-art landscape. What are your competitor landscape? What are your device's competitors reporting on in their published literature? What endpoints are they publishing on? What do the state-of-the-art guidelines, professional guidelines, therapeutic area guidelines, how do they inform your safety and performance objectives? Why is this important? Because the safety and performance objectives, and they do not need to be extremely comprehensive. We've had to counsel many clients that you don't need 6 or 8 of each. That is way more overkill. The notified bodies are really looking for your most critical safety and performance endpoints. And we'll just call it like endpoints. What are the most important data points that you're going to want to collect clinical data on, both for your own on your own device, that would ultimately demonstrate the safety and performance of your device as intended, as it's written in the IFU and in your intended purpose statements. So that's the bar. That's what you need to point to. And so clinical benefits are not the same as safety and performance objectives, is how I would start with that, the answer to that question.
All right, thanks, Lori. Moving on to our next question. This attendee is asking if you can combine the CDP and the CEP.
The clinical development plan, as some of you might know, is a relative newcomer to the MDR submission landscape. I remember in 2018, we weren't really talking about the CDP at all. 2019 started to talk about it. And it's really become a critical document in the submission to the notified bodies. That said, this seems to be an evolving question. And as a vendor, we will do what the client asks us to do. Some clients ask us to append the CDP to the CEP. That's not our favorite thing to do because we think the notified body doesn't want to see one large report, the CDP, relatively lengthy report, appended in a CEP, which can also be relatively lengthy. So appending it, maybe not so much. We've summarized the CDP in the CDP in the CEP, and in some cases we have included the entire CDP in the CEP. Do I have the magic crystal ball to say where we're going with that, where the notified body is going with that? I don't. We haven't. I tend to think that the notified body is going to want to see that entire CDP land in the clinical evaluation plan. And that seems to be, if I had a crystal ball, that seems to be the way things are going. So if the question is, can you combine them? The answer has, we've already, in our experience, that's already been proven as a yes. Is it ideal to combine them? Maybe, maybe not. Are we going to need to start combining them? Will the notified body demand that? Possibly in the future.
All right. Here's our next attendee's question. At what stage of development do you recommend to go to notified bodies for support?
Well, that's a great question. Remembering that we are a vendor to medical device companies and that we do not interact directly, our team does not interact directly with a notified body, or are often not present in the overall development of a CER early in the planning stages, we don't exactly know what each of you and internally do about going to the notified bodies to get feedback. I would say, and I've heard our clients talk about that early engagement is very important. Building the relationship, getting in front of your notified body, all of these, we are certainly aware, have secondary awareness from our clients how difficult it is to engage with a notified body and to get meaningful feedback from them in any kind of time frame that is helpful. So my opinion would be is early engagement, early support, and get what you can. And the notified bodies, as we all know, do not engage actively in consultation, like giving you answers. So support, what does support mean in this case? That could be defined by your notified body. How much support will they give you? How much will they withhold because they don't want to advise or consult? So the answer to the question is as early as possible, and then hope to get meaningful answers from them as you move along.
Okay, thanks for that advice. So the next two questions I'm putting together up on the screen. These are from two different people. One attendee is asking, can risk-benefit analysis be defined quantitatively, and is it possible? And another attendee has sent in that RQM has done a webinar on this topic on how to calculate benefit-risk ratio. So Lori, what would you have to say on this topic?
Yeah, the question then they go on to say is this questioner is saying that our notified body did require us to provide a mathematical risk-benefit ratio. I do think it's going to start to become more common. I get this question in almost every webinar. I can only speak to our experience so far, and we've probably written about 150 plus at this point, MDR, CERs over the last year and a half, 2 years, possibly more. I think it's an evolving question. First of all, we at Criterion Edge, and we've worked with the very largest of some of the medical device companies to the very smallest medical device companies. And 100% of those MDR CERs that we have prepared, the benefit risk ratio is not quantitative. It is a justification, and a strong one. It must be that justification of the safety and performance of the device as intended, and the benefit risk calculation, if you will, or ratio, which are mathematical terms, I understand, that we have never written a CER where we have calculated a benefit risk ratio. The question, how I've always answered this question in other webinars, has been just like I just said. We don't do it. It's never come back on a notified body review that we are aware of from any of our clients. That said, I think it's also unfortunate that the language around the benefit risk ratio is a mathematical type of language. The ratio, the calculation, that naturally leads people to believe that there should be some sort of mathematical formula. And it hasn't been in our experience. It's a justification, it's an argument, it is a laying out of all of the data and walking through the logic of the argument to justify that the benefits outweigh the risks at the end of the day. And that, in fact, is the part of the overall conclusion of the CER. That said, RQM, our friends at RQM Plus, have just done a webinar on how to calculate the benefit risk ratio. Full disclosure from them and from me is that they are very clear in saying this is a novel approach. It's, in other words, it's something that they have taken on themselves to say, well, here's one way you could do it. I looked at it. It seems complex. And at the end of the day, I will say the last thing about this. It's not providing a ratio. First of all, with a mathematical formula, the notified body could argue they don't agree with your math or your mathematical calculation. And that's a risk, that they don't align with it. I believe that it's a much stronger case to put together an oral or written argument about the justification of your device, and not to depend on an untested theory that we have calculated this way to do benefit risk ratio and provided it as a number, and there you go, notified body, accept it. It's because it's a good one. It's a good benefit risk ratio. I think that's a big risk. If you're going to do that in lieu of providing a very, very, very solid argument in the written form. So that's my opinion. If you're interested, our folks, Olivia and folks on my team, why don't you pop that link into the chat box for anyone who wants to go look at that. If you're not already on your computers looking up RQM Plus and benefit risk ratio, we'll put the chat in the chat box, the link in the chat box.
All right, thanks, Lori. We have about 10, 15 minutes left. So if you have not sent in your question and you're still thinking about it, go ahead and do that soon. We'll keep running through as many more as we can. Moving on to our next question. This attendee is asking, should the state-of-the-art chapter in the CEP be identical with the state-of-the-art chapter in the CER?
The short answer to that is we advise, and most of our clients believe that the best way to do that is that they are identical. This is another evolving. So we are all in an evolving landscape. We know that. So this was never even discussed in our experience. Certainly in 2020, maybe in 2021, a few of our clients were saying, well, let's develop the state-of-the-art section first for the CER, and then let's pop that in its entirety into the CEP. That can certainly be done. And now I would say that it's become closer to the norm for us to do that. We don't always do it, but it seems to be aligning. And which means, so this means from a planning standpoint, so let's just talk about that for a minute. From a planning standpoint, the state-of-the-art section of the CER, which you are now putting into your plan, is going to have some version of data in it, and it's competitor data. And it's going to establish your safety. So you must have your safety and performance objectives established. You must do your state-of-the-art search, and you must have performed your competitor device search. All of that is required in order to be able to write a state-of-the-art section, both for the CER and if you're going to include it in its entirety in the CEP. So there's a lot of upfront work that needs to happen. So again, I caution you all on time. The state-of-the-art section of the CER requires 2 literature searches, state-of-the-art and competitor, to establish your acceptance criteria. So that's early, and you've got to get started on that right away. So factor that into your planning and timelines.
Okay, thanks, Lori. Here's our next question. How do we tell the story of a device with less than ideal safety and performance data?
Well, the first word that comes to mind is honestly. The notified body will see through any look over here and not over there kind of a writing. They're going to look at everything. So you have to face less than ideal safety and performance data head on with justifications. And here's how I interpret what that means. We just talked about safety and performance objectives and the acceptance criteria, whereby the subject device, the device under evaluation, whereby the subject device's own clinical data will be evaluated, against which your own subject device's data will be evaluated. So when I hear less than ideal safety and performance data for the subject device, I interpret that to mean that there are incidents when the subject device's data do not meet the standards, or meet or exceed the minimal standards established by the acceptance criteria. That's what that means to me. So, and we have had that happen with some of our clients. It's not a pretty place to be, but it happens with some of our clients. That's when good writing really comes in handy, because you're going to need to justify that your own device's data falling short on either one or more safety or performance objectives. You'll need to tell the story about why that happened, what you're doing about it, other data that you might be able to pull forward that helps mitigate that shortfall, or future plans to investigate further and to mitigate, especially from a risk management perspective. All of that I just mentioned are ways to tell the story and the spots in the CER in which you could do that. Whether all that is effective and the notified body allows you to follow up on perhaps follow-up plans is up to them. But those are ways that you can tell the story when your own device's data falls short.
All right. Moving on to our next question. This attendee is asking, does classification, low risk versus medium or high risk, affect the need or quality of safety and performance endpoints?
It does not affect the need whatsoever. The safety and performance endpoints and the acceptance criteria that go with those are required for all CERs. So regardless of, and all devices that require a CER, so regardless of class 2A all the way up to class 3. Does it affect the quality of the safety or performance endpoints? I'm not sure what quality means. Safety and performance endpoints need to be as quantitative as possible. If they are not, if that's difficult or even impossible to do, then, and they are qualitative in nature, or some of them, they have to be very, very tightly defined, so that when you go out to your competitors to find acceptance criteria, those acceptance criteria, what your competitors are reporting on, need to align with how you've defined any particular safety and or performance endpoint. So the quality of the safety and performance endpoints that you select for yourself need to be such that the notified body understands them and agrees with their relevance and agrees with your selection out of competitive literature of the appropriate acceptance criteria. So the classification of the device does not preclude you from doing what I just said. The classification has no real effect on that. Unless you're in a completely different kind of class where, like we're talking about well-established technology. If we're talking about things like that, that's a little different. If we're not talking about a wet device, then the classification of the device has no bearing on the quality of the safety and performance endpoints, in our opinion.
All right, I can see there's so many questions coming in. I think we have time for a couple more. Here's our next question. This attendee is asking, do we always need to include a PMCF study for data collection?
Well, as we interpret the regulations with regards to PMCF activities are proactive activities undertaken by the device manufacturer, as opposed to the more passive collection of PMS data as it comes in through channels to the manufacturer. So do we always need to include a PMCF study? If you don't have in our opinion, again, if you don't have any kind of study or proactive PMCF activities to collect ongoing collection of data that's being proactively collected, then I would think that the notified body would be unhappy about that. Also, it does not serve the manufacturer well. The notified body is basically requiring that the manufacturers take on this proactive collection of safety and performance data on an ongoing basis. And why wouldn't you want to do that? You're you can be the master of your own clinical data destiny by looking at your safety and performance objectives that you've selected for the particular device and designing a study, a tool, user feedback, survey tool, whatever it might be, that you ongoing collect data that speak directly to your device's safety and performance endpoints. Why would you not want to do that? You become sort of the master of your own data collection destiny at that point, because what we're finding a lot with our clients who have not undertaken PMCF activities yet is that they are showing up for the first time to get MDR certification with why we get hundreds of questions about data sufficiency. What do I do about data sufficiency? I'm worried about data sufficiency. PMCF activities solves that problem for you. So be thinking very strongly about designing well-designed surveys, studies, and so forth, and in the PMCF space, and make those ongoing. That's my opinion about that. That is great data. It's manufacturer-held data, and the notified body looks at that data and takes it under consideration. So absolutely.
All right, thanks, Lori. And here's our next question, and I think this is a good question to end on, something that Cheryl, Lori, and I were actually talking about just before this webinar. Is there any update on EU MDR deadline extension? And Cheryl, would you like to take this one? Cheryl, you may be on mute.
Sure. Uh-oh.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Great.
we can now. You're not muted anymore. Great.
Very good. Excellent. Well, Olivia, I'm happy to answer or address this for now. And as Lori was mentioning earlier, speaking of the evolving nature of MDR and IVDR submissions, in latest news, on Friday, December 9th, the European Health Commissioner proposed postponing the MDR transitional deadline to the EU's 27 member states during a session of the Employment, Social Policy, Health and Consumer Affairs Council in Brussels. And at that time, the European Health Commission urged the Council and the European Parliament to extend the deadline for higher risk Class 3 and Class 2B devices to 2027, and the deadline for lower risk Class 1 and Class 2A devices to 2028. The important piece of this information, this new news, if you will, this evolving landscape, is that there may be some change to come. And obviously, the members will review this in January when Sweden takes leadership of the Council. So more news to follow on this front. But regardless of the outcome of this proposed extension, it is really of monumental and critical importance for both the medical device and in vitro diagnostic device industries, and those of you on this call, to consider getting a jump start on the identification of your unique challenges and potential hidden traps for the pursuit of an MDR or IVDR aligned submission for your device or devices. And as we mentioned earlier, an efficient and affordable early approach is to set you on the right path as early as possible is a gap analysis of your current MDD or MDR or IVDD or IVDR related documents or drafts. And we here at Criterion Edge are more than happy to engage with you in that regard as we stay tuned on the latest developments in the regulatory space to follow in January or early February.
That's
Olivia?
great, Cheryl. Thanks for finding that. Yeah, I think you were just about to say, Cheryl, can we put that in the chat box, that link?
Yes, please. There is a link that we will place in the chat box, and that's going to link you to Regulatory Focus, which is a RAPS publication that contains an excellent article with further details about the proposal from the European Health Commissioner.
Great.
All right, great. Thanks, Cheryl. We will pop that in the chat in just 1 second. And we are out of time. If we did not get to your question, or if you have further questions after attending today, you can book an appointment with our specialist. They have set aside time specifically for our attendees today to discuss your questions further or ask us about getting on track to meet your MDR and IVDR deadlines. You can send us an email to consult@criterionedge.com. Thank you again, Lori and Cheryl, for joining us, and everyone for your great questions. Happy holidays, and we hope to see you in the new year.